Merry Christmas, everybody, and a very Merry Christmas to the great people at Window Nation who sponsor this Cowboys Overtime on StarTelegram.com. I am Fort Worth Star Telegram columnist Mac Engel, and I'm joined by my good friend Nick Harris, who is running very late.
Yeah, Nick? It's on me today. Every technology device in my entire life decided to take a poop on me this morning, so it was a difficult task getting in here. But we're here.
Yeah, we're here. We made it.
It was a 5 and 7 morning.
It is a 5 and 7 morning. Speaking of 5 and 7, things are looking pretty good for your Dallas Cowboys, Nick. We went from 3 and 7 to hopeless and maybe the first pick in the draft to now all of a sudden the Cowboys are going to the playoffs, baby. Steve, do we not have a graphic for that or anything? I guess we don't. Candy took the day off because she's sick, and now our very erstwhile and capable other videographer, Mr. Steve Wilson, is handling responsibilities at the 11th hour, I might add. I don't want to say hero, but you might. So the Cowboys are going to the playoffs. It's ridiculous. Cowboys are 5 and 7. They play Monday night along with Barton and Homer Simpson against the 4 and 8 Bengals. Okay, so Nick, let's walk through the scenario for a second.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous, but 7 teams get in from the NFC as the NFL needs more money. So by having more playoff games, they make more money because the league is going broke. Okay, the Cowboys in order play Cincinnati on Monday night in Arlington. The Bengals are 4 and 8, probably the most disappointing team in the league, if not the discussion. Then they go on the road to Charlotte, where they will play the 3 and 9 Carolina Panthers. They come back home to play my good friend Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a couple of days before Christmas. And then they go on the road and play the Philadelphia Eagles in the second to last game of the season. The Eagles are 10 and 2. By the way, the Bucs are 6 and 6. And then they finish up at home against the team that they just kicked the hell out of, the Washington, whatever they're called. Is there any way, Nick, the Cowboys actually make the playoffs?
They would have to win out, and I've been trying to break down scenarios with even a loss thrown in the mix there, and there is a reality where they can go 9 and 8 and squeak in, but they would need some crazy things to happen, just because all of those teams that could be in that 9 and 8 discussion are teams that they don't own the tiebreaker against. You're talking about Atlanta, you're talking about San Francisco, you're talking about some of these other teams in the NFC, potentially even Washington. If you were to beat them in the final week to be a 9 and 8 type situation, it would come down to a tiebreaker if they were to lose in that game. But I think overall they would have to win out. They got to go 10 and 7. And to be honest, of the remaining games that they have on their schedule, I think this one on Monday night is probably the second most difficult behind the Eagles game.
I don't see that. Cincinnati, even though Cincinnati comes in with a 4 and 8 record and has an atrocious defense, Cincinnati right now is a 5-point favorite. Joe Burrow is having an MVP season, but because he plays on a 4 and 8 team, he won't be considered. Jamar Chase is a top 3 receiver. The Bengals offense is lighting up because Joe Burrow is having such a great year. I don't see how the Cowboys can win this game unless it's the Bengals, and that team's got a lot of quit in them. That organization's got a lot of quit in them. They don't care. The people who run that team don't care. And I say that as somebody, as you can see by my Bengals Super Bowl champion pennant. There's a story behind that. But people can sit there and say, well, Jerry doesn't care. The Cowboys, no, they care. There are different levels to not caring in professional sports, and the Bengals could offer a master class in not caring about winning games. They're amazing at it. Do you see any way that the Cowboys win? I see one way. Do you see any way that they beat the Bengals?
I'm curious if your way is the same as mine. In my opinion, the best defense is good offense, and they got to win the time of possession battle. They need Rico Dowdle to be able to carry the ball 25 times and maintain that clock and be able to dominate in that sense. They have won each of their last 2 games off the back of winning the time of possession battle. They're 3-1 on the season whenever they do possess the ball for more than 30 minutes. So I think this is an opportunity for Rico Dowdle in this run game to really just kind of sink their teeth in and try to figure out what works and throw the kitchen sink at this Bengals defense. They are 31st in the NFL in rushing defense, even worse than the Cowboys at this point, which is insane to say. We didn't think anybody would be worse when we looked up at about week 6. But if they can keep the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands, out of Jamar Chase's hands, then it's an opportunity for this offense to kind of shorten the game. We always talk about on the college football side of things, and it's kind of tailed off in recent years, but Army is still a really good program, but would go on the road and play at the Big House. They would play in Norman, and they would force Michigan and Oklahoma into overtime. And everybody's like, how the hell do they do this? They shorten the game, and they make Oklahoma have to score on 3 possessions. And then that's how they can push into overtime. That's kind of what the Cowboys need here, except I don't think you're going to see Tom Landry bringing out the triple option or the veer on Monday night.
I'm with you. I thought their one shot at winning was Rico Dowdle has a great game. He's obviously played very well. He's certainly played his way onto this team next season, I think. I don't know if he's necessarily a feature back. You and I have talked about that. But he's a good player, and he's somebody that the Cowboys fully recognize should have been their RB1 from week 1. If Dallas falls behind by 10, they're toast. If they're going to ask Cooper Rush to throw them back into the game, there's no way. But if they can get on top, 6-0, 7-0, and they make Joe Burrow have to chase it against an offense that's controlling the clock, yeah, they got a chance. And I keep coming back to one thing. Cincinnati as an organization, we haven't, I don't think you and I have talked about this, but teams follow their leadership.
Yeah.
And when your leadership prioritizes the things that the Bengals leadership prioritizes, then eventually it trickles down and it has an effect. It just does. Yeah. And I know Zach Taylor's a good coach. He's done what he can. Joe Burrow's a great player, a great pro. He's doing what he can. But eventually, if you feel like your organization, your leadership is too indifferent, then eventually you will be too. And that's another reason why I think Dallas can win this game.
Reminds me of Cincinnati this year specifically is Patrick Mahomes when he was at Texas Tech, just throwing for 1,000,000 yards and having phenomenal outings, and the defense just not helping him whatsoever. I mean,
oh my God!
You flip this record. Let's just say the Bengals are 8-4. We're talking about Joe Burrow MVP for sure. You mentioned it early on. I think he's one of the top candidates, if not the top. He's leading the league in passing yards, leading the league in passing touchdowns. Only 5 interceptions. I believe that the Cowboys threw 5 interceptions in one game earlier this season. I don't think so, but they've had two games with 5 turnovers. But overall, I think Burrow in this offense, it's legit. And against the Cowboys defense, that is, while they are starting to figure things out, I don't think this is a good time for this matchup.
No, I think, and if you go look at what Cincinnati's done this season, they've had, so many close losses in games where they should have won. The Rams come to mind, both games against Baltimore. They're so close to being 8-4 or 9-3. And, the reality of it is they neglected their defense. They don't have anybody who can stop even decent running backs. And that's why Joe Burrow and that offense now are chasing games, and he's putting up cartoon numbers because they've got to throw it. And that's a little unfair to Joe in some regards because he is the guy who should be an MVP candidate, but he's not going to be because the rest. Let's move on to our next topic, and that is the head coach. This week, an injured Dak Prescott spoke to our good friend Jory Epstein, now of Yahoo Sports. She's working for Yahoo Sports. She's known Dak for, I think since he walked in the door. And, Dak was very honest with her. He said, I feel bad for, if this is basically Mike McCarthy's last shot, I feel bad that I wasn't able to basically get him another deal. And if you read it, the way I interpreted it is that Dak Prescott was lobbying for Mike McCarthy to come back. Did you read it that way?
Yeah. There's a couple of thoughts that I have on that Dak interview. One being, okay, let's take the context of the situation. A being Dak Prescott is a very good spokesman. He's a very good politician in some ways. Yep. He's not going to say anything that, is going to draw negative headlines. He's not going to say anything that he shouldn't say. He's going to say everything that needs to be said 100%. Now, I don't want to discount his support for Mike McCarthy because he could have taken the Micah Parsons route and just being like, hey, that's above my pay grade, but we're trying to win for the guys, he didn't do that. And he doubled down. I wholeheartedly believe in him. I wholeheartedly believe he needs another chance. there's going to be an interesting discussion had at the end of this season, however it ends, whether they go 5-12 or 10-7, however it wraps up. I think there's a situation where his name is on the table and they look at the totality of his 5-year tenure and they see 12-5 seasons sandwiched in between injury-ridden campaigns. And that's when the support of Dak Prescott will come into play. That's when the support of Micah Parsons could come into play.
Yeah.
Now, what they voice to the public might not be the same support that they give in that room. I'm not trying to theorize or anything, but they're going to say a lot different things to us in the media than they are actually going to say in that room if they are brought in and their input is valued. So, I take it for what it is. Absolutely. It's Dak publicly supporting Mike McCarthy. But at the end of the day, he's publicly supported every coach he's had here. And obviously every coach he's had here is no longer here.
Yeah, and I come back to how many similarities I'm beginning to see between this season here in 2024 and Mike McCarthy's first season in 2020. Now, Dak Prescott suffered a season-ending ankle injury in week 5. They bring in a host of quarterbacks because Andy Dalton, his replacement, eventually got hurt. So you've got a revolving door there. You had a defense that was historically bad, so they could change out Mike McCarthy's preferred defensive coordinator and Mike Nolan, which led to Dan Quinn for 3 seasons. So now, but the team didn't give up. And for a brief window, they had an outside shot at that 7th and final playoff spot. Then they went up to New York in week 17. And that was the COVID year. So the whole thing was kind of a disaster. So they went up to New York and they really weren't in the game. I shouldn't say that. They had kind of a shot, but they weren't going to win. But they stayed with it and they gave themselves this thin appearance of a chance. Well, now here we're in 2024. The defense hasn't been very good. The roster was wholly inadequate. I don't know if the Joneses will own that. Kind of they have. Dak Prescott's out for the year. They've given themselves a chance to make some games in December, at least right now, appear to be relevant. Although I think if you look at it deeper, like we just did with Cincinnati and some of these other matchups, it really doesn't bode well for them. But the point is, there are a lot of similarities between 2020 and now. And the difference was in 2020, we said, that was a terrible hand for the head coach. He deserves a second look. And they ripped off 3 straight 12-5s.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like we're saying the same thing now. Why?
Yeah, I think it's just because of that lack of playoff success. That's always going to be in the back of everyone's mind, whether it be fans, front office. Being in the building last year after the loss to the Packers, there was an unease everywhere. I mean, lights were off and on the second level of the building, and it's just like, why are the lights off? This is a work day. It was an eerie time, and there was a snow freeze going on outside, and everyone was wondering, okay, is Mike going to be here next week? And he was. And if there was questions after that type of season where they finished second in the NFC, sure, they fell on their face in the playoffs. I just don't see a reality where there could be, if they look at this whole picture and they understand everything that goes into it, that they don't see the lack of success in the playoffs at the end of the day. That's still got to be valued. Now, I could see a path to where Mike McCarthy is back with the caveat that he has to have a different offensive play caller. And I think we talked about this on the show last week. Just having a different coordinator, whether that's one brought in or one that he already has in the building. I could see a reality where it's like, okay, yes, we'll bring you back a couple of years, but we're going to change up this offense and make it into something that we want it to be, being the front.
So you think they would? Does that mean running off Brian Schottenheimer?
Either running off Brian Schottenheimer or giving him the keys, one of the two.
Well, it's an interesting scenario because I know I kind of got laughed at when I said, do not rule out bringing back Mike McCarthy. And I can sit here and really justify that decision. But you mentioned playoff success and that's your time to shine. Right. And the truth of the matter is, since he's come here, best case, the top teams are here, right? Whomever, Kansas City, take your pick. And the Cowboys, best case, they've been right here. And they've played, 4 playoff games under McCarthy. They've won 1. The first one at home against San Francisco, they lost to a better team, but they didn't play well. Yeah. I mean, the front 4 of San Francisco in that wild card loss at AT&T Stadium. Absolutely just destroyed them. And they come back the next year. They get to the playoffs. They play very well against a Tampa team that was just not as good. Tom Brady was at the end, but they rolled them and they did what they were supposed to do. Then they go to San Francisco, and there are 5 plays in that game that decided it, and the Cowboys didn't make any of them.
Yeah,
the 49ers made them. So the 49ers win, advance on. And then last season, that was inexcusable. And so if they sit there and they evaluate the whole thing, I can sit there and say, you know what? You had 5 years, you had your opportunity, you did a good job, but we got to find somebody to make us go a little bit higher. So that's why I can also understand. So you know what? The team wasn't quite good enough. You did a great job with what you were handed. Let's run it back, and we'll give you a 2-year deal with a club option for whatever. I don't know. I'm making stuff up, but I can see the rationale between both decisions, and I don't have a feel for it right now. And if you look at these remaining 5 games, how many do you think he has to win for the Cowboys to be able to sell it that it's a good idea that he comes back with it? Because it's going to require an extension, obviously.
Yeah, I would say that they have to finish at least over 500. They would have to go 4-1. Wow. I think just to be able to sell it. I don't even see 8 and 9. I mean, 8 and 9 we're kind of talking there, but then if we're talking 7 and 10, double-digit losses, yeah. I don't know. I don't think you can sell that.
I think you're probably right. All right, we've got more to talk about here on Cowboys Overtime, but first let's hear from our friends at Window Nation.
Window Nation, the star of window replacement and proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys, can help you fill the house this season with savings. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free, and make no interest payments for 60 months, 5 full years. Fill your house for a customized authentic Dallas Cowboys jersey while supplies last. You could even help fill the Cowboys house and win tickets to a game. Visit windownation.com/Cowboys now for details. Call 866-95-NATION. Window Nation, proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay, thank you very much, Window Nation, for sponsoring this Cowboys Overtime on StarTelegram.com. I am Mac Engel. It's Christmas season. I don't want anything. I don't. I just need money to pay bills. He's Nick Harris. Nick, what do you want for Christmas?
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm 100% with you.
Just pay money's to pay bills?
I'm a simple man. You know, just totally give me a nice little breakfast and let's watch NFL and NBA all day and maybe watch.
What do you want for breakfast on Christmas morning?
Yeah, again, I'm simple. Just, eggs, turkey bacon, nice little
turkey bacon.
I'm a turkey bacon guy. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's not bacon. Okay, so go back in your memory bank. What is your most cherished Christmas morning Christmas gift that you can recall receiving?
Man. Well, this is an awkward conversation now because I'm actually Muslim.
Are you really?
I only had about 4 Christmas mornings before
I didn't know
that happened when I was about 5-6 years old. So yeah.
Do you remember any of them?
I really don't, to be completely honest. I do remember asking for this one outlandish Christmas gift when Santa was still real. Mm-hmm. And whenever it didn't come, I just thought Santa was the worst person ever. I was like, that may have really played into the decision, honestly. Who knows?
The flip. So this is a question I didn't anticipate asking. I didn't know that. Does that religion participate in a big gift-giving holiday?
There are 2. It's called Eid, E-I-D, and there's 2 of them. One at the end of Ramadan, and then one during the summer as well. And so it's typically the one at the end of Ramadan, though, where the gifts are exchanged and there's a big gathering and family and all of that. So,
is it as obnoxious as Christmas is?
Not nearly. It's not as driven into capitalism.
Okay, you may have found a convert just to bring the price down. Okay,
doing my duty.
It's right. Do you get like a finder's fee or something like that?
Exactly.
Okay, the Cowboys have ripped off this magical 2-game winning streak against division rivals. Okay, let's go on the pros and cons of this. In these 2 wins, what are some pros that have come out of this winning streak that you said that's a good thing?
Yeah, shameless plug. Go to StarTelegram.com. Wrote about 5 bright spots that I think have kind of led to this upswing.
That is not a shameless plug. That is a necessary young man.
But DeMarvion Overshown, I think it has to start there, right?
Yeah.
You look at the impact that he's brought to the defense. This is something you can really build around for the foreseeable future. This is his first year in the NFL, playing in the NFL. Granted, second year in the league, he dealt with that torn ACL last year, but you see him flying to the ball. You see him impacting plays in the run game. It's attacking the quarterback, making plays in coverage. I think he could be a little bit better in coverage. I think that will come as his career goes on. There's a lot as far as getting used to that position that he's going to have to come about in the years to come. But you look at his pedigree, going from high school to college as a safety, and he moved down to linebacker at Texas, got bigger, got a little bit more swole, and was able to cover that middle of the field and was really well as a coverage linebacker. And then in his final season at Texas, they started throwing him off the edge and letting him attack the quarterback. He has experience at all three levels that could help impact this defense. And I think that's got to be the first thing talked about whenever you think about the future and what could happen. And that leads right into the pass rush. Michael Parsons' presence in the pass rush, I think it's a trickle-down effect for everybody. Not only guys like Overshown. You look at a guy like Carl Lawson, who was almost destined to go to the UFL here in a couple of months, and now we're talking about potentially bringing him back for a one-year deal as a rotational pass rusher type guy. I mean, the production you lost from Dante Fowler a year ago, you've almost directly replaced with Carl Lawson. Granted, they still need that Dorrance Armstrong presence, but injuries haven't really helped. But as that defensive line gets healthier and the pass rush starts to come back alive again, I think that's a bright spot you could certainly look at. On the offensive side of the ball, the run game. We've talked about Cooper Rush, and it's like, okay, what has he figured out these last couple of games? That was a question that was asked to me on the Fan yesterday, and I was like, I think it's more so him having a running game. You go back to 2022 when he was 4-1 in that stretch. It's because he had a healthy running game. There wasn't so much being asked of him. He was able to run a balanced offense. And I think when he can do that, he is at his best, because then he's not taking any chances. He's not forcing the ball into turnover-worthy plays. As long as Rico Dowdle can keep this production up, then I do feel like they get a couple more wins out of this final 5-game stretch, and maybe a couple that they shouldn't. At this point in December, you have to get wins that you can't, and I think that running game will certainly help in that sense.
To me, I certainly agree with Overshown. He looks like if he stays healthy, he's going to be a player. Now they've had some issues with healthy linebackers over the years. Going back to Sean Layton, Bruce Carter, and certainly Leighton Vander Esch. But Overshown looks like he's so quick. He is so fast. So that's certainly a big plus. The ones that I look at are a little bit kind of boring. I know we've had a lot of talk about Tyler Guyton as a rookie and his struggling at tackle, but there's a player there. They're going to have to be a little patient because he played so little in college. So that's kind of a pro-con thing. But to me, and this leads into a con, but certainly the development of TJ Bass and Brock Hoffman on the offensive line. I mean, those guys were nobodies. And if you look at the way they've developed and their grades on Pro Football Focus, which, I know there's some gray there.
It's a reference point. It's a reference point.
You're right. It's a reference point, and it's something to look at. It's not complete incontrovertible fact, but it is something to kind of give you an idea of how a player is kind of trending. And the fact that they've developed those guys and those guys have developed is such a positive for that team, because you don't know when you're going to find them. And especially that's how they found Terrence Steele. And I know Terrence has struggled a little bit, but that's how you find those guys. And those guys, you can make an argument. Brock Hoffman has been better than Zach Martin. And I know I hate to say it, especially in light of the fact that this is one of the cons. We might be watching the end of Zach Martin's career. You wrote it after Mike McCarthy announced that Zach will have season-ending ankle injury. Oh, season-ending ankle surgery.
Something like that.
Something like that. But it's a real bummer because Zach's been one of the great pros for this franchise since he walked in the door. And, he had kicked it around last offseason. He talked about it, that he was, he knows that he's closer to the end than the beginning. And I think anybody who watched him play this season recognized that dominant guard, a Hall of Fame guard, he really wasn't there. Not that he was bad. He wasn't bad. But he was a player that you literally never had to worry about for more than – that's just unheard of. For a decade, he was just so good. And, that's a real bummer. I think, some of the other cons that I look at, they just haven't developed any other receivers. none of those guys I don't think have stepped up. I know Jalen Tolbert occasionally you kind of want to make him, oh, he's something. In terms of a pro, I think Cooper Rush has played his way onto an NFL field someplace, or an NFL roster rather, whether it's here or someplace else. He's going to get a job. That goes back to coaching and development and being a pro. I think all those things are positives. Certainly the play of Josh Butler, the cornerback, before he got hurt. I mean, what a great story. And I just hate the fact that he got hurt. But those are some pros and cons that I see. But certainly the one that I want to ask you about is Zach Martin. And what do you think his future is like, either with the Cowboys or this is it?
I'm toying on writing a column about this, and I probably will.
You should. You should.
I think Zach Martin is one of those guys who wants to go out on his own terms. And that's not a shade to a guy like Sean Lee or Leighton Vander Esch. Those guys had injuries that, had to be dealt with, and they had to be dealt with off the football field.
Yeah.
I don't take Zach Martin to be a guy to let this be the end. And he restructured his contract this past offseason to give him almost in a sense a player option for 2025. If he wants to be back for only one more season, that deal is already in place and he can do that. He would need to make that decision by the fifth day of the league year, which starts around March 14th, March 15th, whatever that Monday is. So whatever the fifth league day is after that, he would have to make that decision by then, because that's when his money would hit for 2025. I don't know. This is just me theorizing at this point. Zach Martin said yesterday at his locker that, he's going to focus on his rehab, focus on his recovery, and this isn't the time for figuring out, what's next, but that he's going to do that later on. But I think when those discussions come about, there's going to be a little bit of, hunger still in him. He's only 34. I say only just in the sense that there are offensive linemen that have played well into their 30s. Yep. We talked about Jason Peters being in the building a couple of years ago. He was pushing 40 at that point, or was already over 40. I just think Zach Martin might have one more campaign left in him, but I wonder what that would look like at the end of the day. Would there be a leash on Zach Martin? And if so, what does that look like? And is that something he would be content going out on? Because that would have to be a possibility. You have to factor in all the negative possibilities of coming back another year as well. So I don't think it's a slam dunk that he's done. Could it happen? Absolutely. But I think it's going to be a legitimate discussion.
Yeah, and I think that's a guy who's earned enough, who has earned the right with that franchise to say, this is kind of how I want to do it. Doesn't mean they're going to do it, but he's earned the right to have that discussion. There's so much respect for that guy. Everywhere. And all earned. The tricky thing that he's going to face is, he just might not be the same guy anymore, and you desperately want to be. Now, couple that into the fact that once you start getting hurt, you might get hurt again. Now, you may not. This was not an injury-prone guy. He's had nicks and knacks that he's played through, but he's going to be 35, and he's coming off surgery, and you just don't know. Obviously, he wouldn't do anything in the preseason. Can he make it? 17 games.
Yeah.
We saw it with Tyron Smith, and obviously Tyron had injuries here, but the Jets had to put him on IR. Everybody here knew it was coming. And I think he actually lasted longer than I thought he was going to. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to watch the Jets this season. He wasn't the same guy. Yeah. Now, the Jets are terrible. It wasn't because of Tyron Smith. The Jets are terrible. But he wasn't the same guy. And with Zach, you can hide Zach a little bit because he's a guard. My question to you is, if he does come back and you've got guys who've proven they're younger and they are improving, is playing Zach Martin ahead of Brock Hoffman or TJ Bass, is that getting in the way of progress?
Yeah, and that's what I mean by, what does that leash look like on Zach Martin, if there is one? Because not only those young guys, but you can make the case that if that right guy is sitting for you in the first round, who's an interior lineman, you got to go get him. You got to go get him. And I think
that's
with this
interesting.
Line, it could be a really fascinating conversation come that time. But
do you think they would take a guard? Do you think they would take a guard at 10? Let's say they pick 10. Do you think they would take a guard?
If the right guy is there, absolutely. I mean, you look at a guy like Kelvin Banks out of Texas, Will Campbell out of LSU. These are guys that were playing tackle in college who probably project better in the interior. If they feel like they need to get better on the offensive line, you go get any guy that's there. And I feel like if they need to go get a guard, they can go get a guard. Granted, they do have the interior depth, but they also have a guy in Tyler Smith. Yes, they might like him a little bit better at guard, but what might be better for the long term of this offensive line and protecting now an injury-prone Dak Prescott? And I think you have to put that of most importance. He's the highest paid player in the NFL. You got to make sure that he's not getting hit.
All right, we have one more topic to talk about here on Cowboys Overtime. It's not about the Cowboys, but it is about football. It is about college football. The first 12, there we go. The first 12-team bracket for the College Football Invitational. It's not a playoff. Invitational will be announced Sunday on ESPN the day after all of the conference championship games will be played. There are 2 teams from the great state of Texas that should get in. I think only one is going to get in, and that is the University of Texas. Texas will play Georgia in the SEC championship game on Saturday in Atlanta, in a game that really doesn't mean much other than for seeding of those 12 teams. The wild card in all this is first-time ACC member SMU. SMU is 11-1. They're currently ranked 8th overall in the college football playoff ranking system, 8th. 8th is significant because at 11 is 3-loss Alabama. If SMU does not win on Saturday in the ACC championship game against Clemson, right now SMU is the favorite, SMU is not going to get in because they're going to get jumped by Alabama. We have seen this occasionally in the history of this college football playoff. Certainly most famously, it happened to TCU in 2014 when TCU went into the final week of the regular season. Number 3, that was a 4-team bracket then. Number 3, they blew out Iowa State at home. Ohio State wins later in the evening, and Ohio State in the final ranking jumps TCU, a team that, believe me when I say this, was a top 4 team. Without a doubt. They weren't better than Alabama. I don't think they were better than Ohio State, but I think that TCU team was better than Florida State, and they could have played with Oregon. Yeah. That, to me, remains the most egregious omission in the history of the college football playoff ranking, with the exception possibly maybe of Florida State last season, potentially if you want to say A&M in 2020. But I think SMU has a real case, and I think if they don't win that game, even though they're the favorite, but you never know, upsets happen. If they don't win that game, they're going to get jumped.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. We've seen it time and time again that these big money power conferences from the SEC or Big Ten, they'll squeeze their teams in. And if Clemson ends up taking that ACC championship spot, do not be surprised if SMU is left out. But I would have to think that the resume for SMU would stick out. I mean, the only blemish is a road loss at BYU when BYU was rolling, and it's 3-point loss. You look at electricity, you look at fun. This is a fun team on both sides of the ball. This should be a program that the playoffs should be looking at as a potential fun first round matchup wherever they do land. But unfortunately, they have to win in Charlotte on Saturday. They have to.
Well, I don't know if you saw this. Texas Tech coach Joey McGuire, obviously of the Big 12. Rhett Lashley has made similar comments. He's the head coach at SMU. That basically Joey McGuire's complaint is this comes down to the patch on your jersey. Which conference patch are you wearing? And it's been one of my complaints for the longest time. I think anybody looking at it would say consistently over the last 20 years, the very, very, very best teams, they're in the SEC. Yeah. But in my mind, when I hear Lane Kiffin, who's the head coach at Ole Miss, sitting there telling me about how hard his life is, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but the second tier, the second and third place team, well, let's go down to third place. The third place team in the SEC, to me, it has played out that there's really not that much difference. The best team is the best team. There's a gap. I know everybody likes to talk about the TCU Georgia national championship game, but that was a fiasco. There's no other way around it. But I think when you look at the other teams after the first team, really it's after the first team. I'm sorry. To me, they're pretty much all the same in terms of they're really, really good. But the best team has been the best team. And I that's the part to all this that drives me absolutely crazy. I think if you put SMU is really good. You mentioned they're fun. Kevin Jennings is a terrific player. Cam Ward at Miami. If you put Miami had I know they fell apart late, but it drives me nuts. Now, the one argument this season, I don't think the Big 12 is very good, but I think that Arizona State team is very, very good. And I think they're going to beat up. Yeah, they're hot. They're very good, even though, they're good. They're 1.5 point favorite against Iowa State on Saturday morning at AT&T Stadium. But when you look at all these things, Do you see anything there that says, and I know you've studied this a lot, do you think top to bottom the SEC is that much better than the other three power leagues?
I think NIL is drawing the gap a lot closer for some of these other teams.
Yeah.
Granted, Big Ten, it's very similar, but you look at a program like Oregon. Mario Cristobal left Oregon because he didn't feel like they could win at that level. He went to Miami because he felt like he would have a little bit more support. Wrong decision, because now Oregon is ponying up NIL money out the wazoo. Phil Knight is giving shoes to incoming freshmen. It's unreal.
It is.
And you look at SMU and the things that they were penalized for back in the 80s and given the death penalty for, it's going to be the reason why they resurge and are able to make their way back to the national stage, because they have that NIL money out the wazoo as well. So you're going to see some wild programs kind of come out of nowhere. Like Liberty having as good of a team as they had last year, that wasn't out of nowhere. They have really powerful donors over there. That small college out in the Carolinas.
Oh, it's not small. I mean, Liberty's a big school.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair too. It is fair. It's just more so from the college football perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
Being in the CUSA, and so like that kind of stuff is not crazy to look at. Tulane is a great example. Louisiana Lafayette, they have some weird random donors as well. So you're starting to see NIL draw the gap a little bit closer. I bring that all back to say that the SEC, while I think will always be the power conference in football, I think that difference between the fourth team in the SEC being better than everyone else in the country, that what we've gotten used to over the last decade, I don't think that's necessarily the same anymore.
Neither do I. Okay, let's wrap this up real quick. Cowboys, Bengals, Monday night. You and I both like Dallas to not cover, correct?
Bengals 31-21.
31-21. Okay, give me Saturday. Does SMU get into the playoff by beating Clemson? Right now, SMU is a 2.5-point favorite.
I think they do. I got to ride with the Stangs.
I think they're going to lose, and not because they're not a good team, just because there's always some weird thing that happens on this Saturday. There's always some weird thing that happens, and when I look at those other games, that's obviously the one that matters. Because I think the ACC is going to be a one bid league along with the Big 12. I looked at those there's going to be an upset with one of them. I think SMU, and there's nothing other than just gut instinct. I think they're going to lose. So, but I would notice, I would say this: when it comes to betting on games, no one's worse than I am. You have nothing to say to that? I think Nick froze up on me. Okay, well, Nick's had a hell of a time with technology. Look at that. What a horrible picture to freeze up on. His tongue is sticking out. The poor guy. Anyways, I'm going to take a screenshot of that and send it to him. For all of your Cowboys coverage needs, be sure to check us out on StarTelegram.com. Cowboys, Bengals, along with the Simpsons on Monday night. See you next week.